Hi, friends. I'm Nicole Arcello, and welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of In Behalf of Animals. I'm so excited to be back and to kick off another season of inspiring conversations with people fighting every day for the animals. We are here because the animals can't wait. They need us. They need you now more than ever. We're starting this season with something close to our hearts, Horseracing Wrongs. I'm here with Patrick to talk about how it all began, what's really happening to the horses used for racing, and how you can take action. So, Patrick, I think we should just start at the beginning.
Yeah, so around about 2000, between 2009 and 2012, I was writing the animal rights blog for the Albany Times Union. And I was trying to cover, of course, all the various animal related issues. When I began researching horse racing, two things jumped out. One, there was a dearth of information out there. No one knew how many horses were dying at American tracks, let alone the circumstances in which they were dying. And while there were occasional stories about drugs in racing, an issue, by the way, that still receives disproportionate attention in the media today, there was virtually nothing on racing's other attendant cruelties. Two, there was no group in the country taking this industry out. The big groups like PETA and HSUS merely gave racehorses a cursory consideration, and there were no smaller groups like Grade 2K with the greyhounds hyper-focused on the issue. So, with no equine background but a rudimentary knowledge of the racing industry, I decided to step into what I saw as a large void in the animal rights community and created Horseracing Wrongs in 2013, learning about both horses and horse racing as I went.
You just created this out of nothing,
Yeah,
right?
I really looked at the landscape, the animal rights landscape, and saw that no one was doing this. And I felt like racehorses, just like every other exploited species, deserve a concentrated voice. And that's what I set out to do, was give them that voice and to make people aware of what was happening. Now, again, we had Grade 2K. I think they began in the year 2000, and they were absolutely focused on one issue and one species, dog racing and the greyhounds, and they did a terrific job and have done a terrific job to the point where we only have 2 dog tribes left in the entire country. So I really kind of thought about modeling horse racing wrongs on Grade 2K, just create a horse racing version of what they had done.
Right. So I'm always in awe, even though I do this with you every single day, of how you really started this from nothing and really built. You found everything there is wrong with racing. Not that there's anything right with racing, but all the cruelties that these poor horses go through. So why don't we talk about that? What happens to the horses? What we call the wrongs?
Yeah, great. And when I started, I was aware of the drugs because, as I mentioned, there were occasional stories about drugs in racing, and obviously the whips is a big issue within the animal rights community. But most people back then weren't aware of all the things that had happened to horses during the course of their so-called careers. So it begins with what we like to call forced separation. So would-be racehorses are forever torn from their mothers, families, and herds as mere babes. They're sold usually at the tender age of 1. They're broken, which is an industry term meaning to be pliant and submissive. And then they are typically sold into servitude at that point. Again, they're alone, terrified, without their herds, and so begins their heartbreaking journey. From there, we call it the grinding of unformed bodies. So horses don't fully mature till the age of 6. So their bones aren't done growing, their growth plates aren't done fusing. And the higher up the horse's body, the slower the process. So the bones in the spine and neck of all places are the last to finish. Racehorses, however, are thrust into intensive training at 18 months and typically first raced at the age of 2. On the maturation scale, a 2-year-old horse is the rough equivalent of a 6-year-old child. So these are unformed bodies and this incessant pounding that they're forced to absorb. We we see in the necropsies that some states give us multiple pages of necropsy documents for each death. States like Maryland, Kentucky, California. We see time and again 4, 3, even 2-year-old horses, adolescents at best, dying with chronic conditions like osteoarthritis and degenerative joint disease, sometimes in all 4 limbs. So that's that grinding that we talk about. Then comes confinement and isolation. And I think, for us as animal rights activists, this is probably the worst of it. So
Yeah.
death is death, right? But it's that unremitting confinement that not just racehorses, but other species are forced to endure that is probably the worst for us as activists. So racehorses are kept locked alone in a tiny 12 by 12 stall for over 23 hours a day. It makes a mockery of the industry claim that horses are born to run, love to run, and it's a cruelty all the worse for being inflicted on naturally social herd animals like horses. And relatedly, negation. So practically all the horse's natural instincts and desires are thwarted through this confinement, creating an emotional and mental suffering that is brought home with crystal clarity. And the stereotypies commonly displayed by confined racehorses, things like cribbing or windsucking, they'll grab onto something in their stall and they'll suck in air. They bob, they sway, they weave, they pace, they dig, they kick, and they even at times self mutilate. This is clear, unequivocal evidence of the mental and emotional distress that these animals are suffering by being locked up in these tiny stalls for 23 hours a day. So we met with Gray 2K back in 2019. They were kind enough to invite us to Boston, and we got to know them and pick their brains on some of their successes and failures over the years. And one thing they told us that really stuck with me. So in 2018, they were fortunate enough to get greyhound racing on the ballot in Florida. At the time, half of the remaining tracks, 11 out of 21 of the remaining dog tracks in America, were in Florida. So it was going to be a simple up or down vote by the citizens. It didn't have to go through the legislative process. So they were doing a lot of polling ahead of the big vote in November, and they were surprised when they got back some of the results that what was resonating the most with the voters was not the deaths plural. At the time, one dog was dying every 3 days on the Florida track, but in fact was the confinement. Those images of those cages stacked one on top of another with those beautiful greyhounds crammed inside for over 23 hours a day, just like with horse racing. They bring these animals out to exercise in the morning, or if it's a race day to race, and it's right back in the cages for the greyhounds, the stalls for the horses. So we have the same exact issue, same exact cruelty in horse racing. So it's our job as activists to make people aware that it is the same thing. Because the difference, of course, is that dogs are in our homes; they sleep in our beds. Horses do not. Horses have always been kept in stalls.
Right.
But once people understand that they're suffering every bit as much as the greyhounds suffer in those cages, it kind of brings it home. So the confinement and isolation and the negation, that for us as activists, I think is the worst of it. It's the worst that we can do to any animal, right? Is to stick them in a box, a cage, a crate, a stall, and take away their autonomy, and because that's unrelenting, day in and day out suffering. So next we have control and subjugation. So the racing people thoroughly control every moment of their assets' lives, control that is often affected through force and intimidation, pushing, shoving, pulling, yanking, goading, prodding, yelling, screaming, and through the tools of the trade. Things like cribbing collars, nose chains, lip chains, eye blinders, tongue ties, mouth bits, and whips. So bits, I do want to get into that a little bit more. So it should be intuitive that shoving a chunk of metal into the horse's soft palate and attaching it to reins as a means of control causes at least some level of physical pain. But here's something else about bits that most people don't know, and something we didn't know up until just a couple of years ago. So We were out protesting in front of Saratoga Racecourse one day, and a professional photographer friendly to our cause was taking shots of us. When she mentioned she'd be going inside to take pictures of the patrons, you, Nicole, asked her to take pictures of the horses' heads and all the attached paraphernalia.
Right.
She took these powerful images, which you can find on our website.
We'll put them in the show notes.
Yeah, and when we look at them, we see abuse, we see sadness, right? But as is my nature, I always try to get expert testimony on these matters instead of us just saying that's abuse, that's cruelty. And so we reached out to Dr. Nicholas Dodman, who sits on our advisory board. Dr. Dodman is a world-renowned animal behaviorist, retired professor from Tufts. He said, it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. He said, I have a better idea. I'll reach out to a colleague of mine from Tufts, Dr. Robert Cook. Dr. Cook, who just recently passed away this summer, spent his entire professional career, decades long, studying and writing about equine ear, nose, and throat, a scholar, an expert beyond dispute. So you can't get much more expert than that, right?
Right.
I initially reached out to Dr. Cook. I asked him if he would write a statement on what these horses are experiencing with all that paraphernalia. At first, he was a bit reluctant. We are, after all, an animal rights organization. But I was able to persuade him. All I was looking for was his considered opinion on what he sees.
Right.
He wrote a devastating statement. There's no other word for it. Devastating. It's on our website. You can find it. He talked about the pain that the bits cause, but he also talked about another aspect that, again, I was unaware of. And I'd like to just read a couple of excerpts from his statement because, it really brings it home.
Yeah.
So again, this is Dr. Robert Cook, an expert on equine ear, nose, and throat. He writes, the horse is a nose-breathing animal. It cannot mouth breathe. In the wild, it runs with a closed mouth, sealed lips, and negative atmospheric pressure in the oral cavity. Suction pressure locks the soft palate onto the root of an immobile tongue to maintain an open airway. A bit breaks the lip seal, admits air into the mouth, and unlocks the soft palate, which now obstructs the airway. But this is not all. A law of physics governing airflow in tubes explains why airway obstruction at the level of the throat will cause pressure damage to the lungs and why all these horses will bleed. As their lungs are repeatedly bruised and quickly waterlogged, some horses may experience severe chest pain and a frightening sensation of drowning. Any one of them could die from so-called exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhage. A better name for this universal problem of the bitted and bleeding racehorse is negative pressure pulmonary edema, a life-threatening emergency in human medicine. Dr. Cook goes on, in a word, all of these horses will experience varying degrees of suffocation. I see that at least 6 of them are harnessed with 2 bits, a snaffle, and a tongue tie. And a ring bit. A ring bit is especially severe, and one horse is encumbered with this and a tongue tie. The physical and emotional enormity of bit usage would be difficult to overstate. Its self-evident purpose to cause pain is bad enough, but its unintended consequence of asphyxiation brings to mind the method's similarity to that of waterboarding. In my opinion, a bitted rein is a whip by another name, unrecognized, lung-damaging device that, during extreme physical exercise, inevitably causes pain, suffocation, and premature exhaustion. Think about that for a moment. Drowning, suffocation, asphyxiation, waterboarding. An expert's words, not mine.
Awful. Horrible.
And again, the vast majority of people are totally unaware of this. And it's something that will never change, can never change. They need the bit as a means of control. So whenever you hear these stories about reform in racing and how animal welfare is their primary concern, think about the bits. Think about confinement, another thing that will never change. Right. Why? Because these are assets. It will never allow horses to roam free in an open pasture with other horses because they have to protect their assets, yet run the risk of injury. So I like to talk about whips. So if you saw someone whipping his dog in the park, you and probably everyone else around you would immediately call 911, and that person would be arrested on the spot for animal cruelty, in many states, felony cruelty. Yet at the racetrack, the public flogging administered to racehorses is all considered just part of the game. And here again, don't allow yourselves to be deceived by industry propaganda. The crop, as they euphemistically call it, is not the harmless guide they would have us believe. It hurts, obviously. Just a few years back, Dr. Rick Arthur, who at the time was the equine medical director for the California Horse Racing Board, was speaking before an international racing conference. And he said, and it's important to note that Dr. Arthur is not against horse racing. He said, there are those who say that the whip doesn't hurt the horses. That's nonsense. Of course it hurts. That's why we use it. Run faster or I will beat you. Again, someone, and first off, a veterinarian saying that, but also someone who's not against horse racing, talking about the pain of the whip. That's why they use it. Okay, it's a motivational tool. And think about that whenever anyone talks about horse racing as a sport. Is there any other sport on the planet where beating provides the motivation for performance, right? So, of course, it's absurd. Bits and whips, again, just part of the tools of the trade. Drugging and doping, most people are aware that there's drugs in racing because it gets a lot of attention. Racehorses are injected legally and otherwise with myriad performance-enhancing, pain-numbing, injury-masking chemicals. The horseman's credo is really simple: keep them out of the track, keep them earning by whatever means necessary. And then there's commodification. By law, racehorses are literal chattel, pieces of property to be bought, sold, traded, and dumped whenever and however their people decide. To make matters worse, they are not even afforded the protections, woefully inadequate as most are, of animal cruelty statutes, meaning an owner or trainer can run his horse into the ground, yes, even to death, with virtual impunity. What's more, the average racehorse will be sold multiple times over the course of its so-called career, adding anxiety and stress to an already anxious, stressful existence. This near constant shuffling among owners, trainers, vets, grooms, barns, tracks, and states is a primary reason why almost all active racehorses suffer from chronic ulcers. And then, of course, there's death. And this is something that we are especially known for. So early on, again, I'm very much a fact, evidence-based person. I need to come armed with irrefutable information.
Right.
And I started filing FOIA requests with state racing commissions immediately. So I asked for the horses who died at their tracks during the course of the year. And if possible, necropsy reports. As I said, not all states give us that, but the ones who do, I would encourage listeners to go on our website and look at the state-by-state death reports and pay particular attention to Maryland, Kentucky, California. They give us full necropsy reports.
And necropsy is an autopsy for animals.
Exactly, right. It's the details, once you start getting in the details. So to date, we have documented with names, dates, locations, and details over 11,700 kills at U.S. tracks just since 2014. Our research indicates that some 1,800 horses perish across America every year. That's 5 dead racehorses a day. And to be clear, death at the track is neither clean nor tranquil. Death at the track is cardiovascular collapse or a failed heart. This, mind you, to animals who are mostly still in adolescence. Death at the track is pulmonary hemorrhage or bleeding out from the lungs. Death at the track is blunt force trauma from flipping backward out of fear or the starting gate, or from collisions with other horses or the track itself. Death at the track is broken necks, severed spines, ruptured ligaments, fractured skulls, and shattered legs, occasionally shattered so severely that the limb remains attached to the rest of the body by skin or tendons only. Obviously, it's in the industry's best interest to get the catastrophically injured horse off the track as quickly as possible, vanned off, they call it, back to the barn where he can be euthanized out of sight, out of mind. But often the injury is so horrific, like dangling, bones protruding, blood gushing, that transport is impossible. So the horse must wait, pain, terror, for the vet to arrive with the pink solution that will end his life. One such horse was Heelbolt, who broke down in a race in Louisiana back in 2009. And an ESPN writer followed the track vet Lauren Kennedy as she went about her business. He wrote, "As she nears Heelbolt, he is facing away from her. She can see he's standing on only 3 legs. His left front ankle is dangling and shattered, attached only by skin. 2 arteries are split. Blood is everywhere. On his leg, his hoof, the grass. His eyes, once coldly fixed on the track, are teary and dilated. His breathing, once quick, has quickened even more. His coat, once shiny from the pumping of oil on sweat glands, has dulled. Out comes the pink. Kennedy strokes his neck to say goodbye, then puts her left index finger on his jugular and presses down, swelling the vein. She drives the needle straight in, piercing his sweaty, leathery skin, and depresses the large plunger with her thumb, pushing in the poison, darkening the pink as it mixes with blood. After it empties, she draws out the needle and repeats the motion with the second syringe. Heelbolt falls under the railing, landing shoulder first, his nose in the dirt. He blinks rapidly for 10 seconds or so, until his eyes, once beautifully alert, are blank. As his fellow horses, having just finished the race, jog by, his life is measured in shallow breaths, until he is no longer breathing, until he is just 1,200 pounds of expired muscle, his bloody, shattered leg hooked on a railing. The writer concludes, "It's hard to know what a peaceful death looks like, but this isn't it."
Every time I hear, because it illustrates what really happens. You know, when we report, when we're doing the social media, or you're doing your daily reports on the website, we use the word euthanasia a lot because that's what's quoted from the charts, right?
Right.
Or from the Boyas or whatever we're doing, mostly the charts. But this isn't, that humane euthanasia that we experience with our companion animals.
Right.
Right. We do that out of love,
Right.
out of, the longer suffering, but these are painful deaths with a tremendous amount of suffering. And these horses have suffered so long. They've suffered in every training. They've suffered during every race. They're given those medications to mask that pain. And then when they are laying there with broken bones, broken bodies, they're suffering.
Right.
And we know.
And terrified. Remember, these are prey animals, flight animals.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost control of their ability to flee.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a component that I think people maybe lose sight of, is the terror that they are feeling in that moment. Not just the physical pain, but the terror.
Right.
Something that we must keep in mind when we're talking about horses at the track. And as I said, the last thing they want to do is euthanize right there in the dirt in front of the public. But when they do,
tarps go up.
Right. When they do that, they put the tarp up.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it was in 23, 2 horses were killed on Travers Day at Saratoga.
Mm-hmm.
And there were reports because Travers is a big race. It's,
Right.
it's maybe the 4th biggest race in the whole country during the course of the year behind the Triple Crown races. Um, there was a lot of reporting after the day after about families, parents shielding their children from what was happening out on the track because those were 2 horses who could not be transported because the injuries were too horrific. Um, and I thought, if this is a possibility that you're going to have to shield your children's eyes,
Right.
then perhaps you should rethink your decision.
Right.
And that was our message, and that is our message, that especially to families at Saratoga Race Course.
And we were there that day.
We were there
protested that
That's
day.
right.
Our mobile billboard was there till after 7 p.m. So as people were coming out, I remember actually that day specifically for multiple reasons, but I remember I was in contact with the driver of the truck that day,
Mhm.
and he was telling me how he was right there at the exit as people were coming out. And he said that people were very upset about him being there. And so it was just another bit of education
Right.
after what they had seen.
Right.
And that.
And that is a challenge for us, right? Whether we're protesting at Saratoga or any other track around the country, most of the time the public doesn't see it because the horse is carted away and euthanized back in the barn. Like I said, out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
So they sometimes maybe they don't believe what we're saying when we talk about these numbers and the details, and because it's not in public view.
Right.
And those details don't get reported. So even if media outlets pick up on a death, they're not going to talk about the open fracture, which means that the bone is protruding through the skin.
Right.
They're not going to talk about ruptured ligaments and fractured skulls and broken necks and the things that we report.
Right.
And directly from FOIA documents, by the way, we report on our website every day. And so if I had one wish, it was that it would be that people would read those state by state death reports that we put out,
Right.
and we've been putting out since 2014, and just start going through the details, and then come back and try to justify this vile, evil industry.
Right.
One that is all about what $2 bets ultimately and frivolous entertainment.
Right.
So I do want to talk about death at the stalls or back in the stalls.
Oh,
So
yes, please.
death also happens back in the stalls from things like colic, which is a painful, terrifying abdominal affliction, and laminitis, which is excruciating inflammation in the feet, which experts have told us is perhaps the most painful way a horse can die. They also die of respiratory infection, neurological disorders, parasitic infestations, the proverbial barn accidents, or as we often see in the FOIA documents, the victim was simply, quote, found dead in the morning. These are fully active racehorses in between races, and again, most of them mere adolescents. Just a couple of the notes on these stall deaths. So we have been reporting these right from the start, along with the racing and training varieties. And almost from the start, industry apologists would come on our site and cry, unfair. Horses die of colic and laminitis everywhere horses are kept. This is true. But as we have documented on the website, studies show that racehorses, by virtue of their confinement, their diet, and just the general way they are treated, are at a higher risk for all these types of deaths than the general population. But here's another way of looking at it. I'm a big history buff, and I and many people know that some 650,000 soldiers died in the American Civil War. Most, however, are unaware that roughly 2/3 of those died of disease. Now, knowing this, have you ever heard in the story try to draw some qualitative or moral distinction between a soldier who died of a gunshot wound on the battlefield and one who died of dysentery back in the camp? Of course not. For if not for the war, they would not have been in that place at that time. Same logic applies here. In short, all deaths in horse racing are by horse racing.
Right.
And then finally, horse racing is slaughter.
Right.
So we do not know the exact number of discarded American racehorses being shipped to Canada and Mexico for slaughter. And just as an aside, we do not currently slaughter horses on American soil. It has been defunded, and meaning that there's no money for USDA inspectors, so they can't open a horse slaughterhouse. Hasn't been banned, just defunded. So now we ship them, which is itself a horror, and I'll get into, to Canada and Mexico. And the problem, of course, is that there's a demand for horse meat in Europe and Asia. If there's a demand, there's going to be a supply. But the general consensus within the rescue community is that we're talking multiple thousands of discarded racehorses annually. In fact, just a few years ago, Alex Waldrop, who at the time was the president of the National Thoroughbred Racing Association, told the USA Today that each year 7,500 American thoroughbreds were being shipped to Canada and Mexico for slaughter. And think about that for a moment. One of the most powerful executives in all of U.S. racing freely admitting to a major publication that every year over 7,000 of his industry's supposed beloved family members, that's something we hear all the time, right? These are like our children, they say. These sources are like our children, are being snuffed out in the most horrific of ways. And those are just the thoroughbreds, mind you. How many more erstwhile standard-bred and quarter horse athletes meet this same brutal end? And what, you may ask, is that brutal end? Sold at auction to kill buyers, transported to holding pens, and ultimately shipped hundreds, if not thousands of miles in cramped trailers where the USDA has determined they can go up to 28 hours without food, water, or rest. Their final destination is a cold, concrete abattoir. Here, among the terrifying sights, sounds, and smells of death, they'll first be shot either with a .22 caliber rifle or a retractable metal bolt to the brain. But often this takes multiple tries as the panicked, head-shy, flight-inclined equines make difficult targets, a fact exacerbated by floors made slippery with blood. They will then be shackled by their hind legs, hoisted and hung upside down, slashed through their carotid artery, bled out, as occasionally while still conscious, and finally butchered for their meat. The whimsical names and cheering crowds a bitter lifetime ago. Of this final horrible treachery or betrayal, Twyla Francois, a Canadian horse slaughter expert, I think said it best, and I'd like to read what she has written. They are so frightened. You can see them in the auction ring, searching, looking for a friendly face. We see this at the slaughterhouses too, where they're still seeking out affection from even the workers themselves. And one thing we saw that really broke my heart was the workers walking by the pens, and the horses would rush up, looking for comfort from these men who were going to kill them. Imagine that.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah. So, when you put it all together, the snapped legs and shredded ligaments of race day, the blown hearts and bloodied lungs of morning practice, the colic laminitis found dead in stall, and the exsanguinations at the slaughterhouse were led to an inescapable conclusion. The American horse racing industry is engaged in wholesale carnage. It's not hyperbole, carnage. I know it's a lot.
It's a lot.
I know.
I'm so happy that we could have an episode all about this so people could hear all of that straight through. We've done talks. You just talked last weekend at the Compassion for Animals Environment Conference, and the whole room was crying. I was crying, other people crying from your stories and the two passages you read here, and I'm so happy about that. So I do have other questions for you,
absolutely.
because I know what people love hearing you speak, and I'm so honored for us to do this. I love hearing you speak. I love you, but I love hearing you speak, and I admire you so much. So I have questions because I know what people like. They ask me, and they want me to ask you, and
Sure.
so. But a few questions I actually things that have come up recently. So I want you to kind of talk about them. I know how well you spoke about, since you just spoke about that, how people in the racing industry, the owners, say they love them like their children. So a lot of people have heard you talk about claiming races, and you know, I know we don't always like to get into the weeds with everything, but I think since we're on a really good forum here,
Yeah.
people can learn about that. And I know that you have in person confronted owners of horses at
Right.
Saratoga Racecourse, and we'll talk a little bit about what we do there too. But go ahead.
Yeah. So the great majority of races in the U.S. are what are called claiming races. It's the bottom tier, not the Triple Crown races, but the so-called meat and potatoes of the racing industry are these claiming races. So claiming race means that every horse prior to the race that's in that race is for sale at a set price. So a $5,000 claiming race, for example, means that each horse in that race is for sale for $5,000. Any licensed owner or trainer can put a claim in on the horse, and at the end of the race, ownership changes hands. And again, this is every day. Now we're talking, well over 3/4 of the races in America are claiming races. So, as you mentioned, occasionally we'll get an owner or trainer trying to engage us in debate outside of Saratoga or any other track that we're protesting at.
Right.
They come out and they're very smug and they think that
I love when they walk up to you, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, here we go. Let's get the cameras out.
Yeah, like we don't know anything, um, and we're just activists, and so they'll start talking, and the first question when they start talking about how pampered the horses are, and um, sometimes they'll say things like, "Yeah, they're like my children." So I'll say, "Have you ever dropped one of your horses in a claiming race?" And inevitably, they have because
Well,
again,
that's when they
it's
realize that you know what you're talking about.
right. So because again, the vast majority of races are claiming races, and if you're in this industry, you're going to have, you're going to be involved in a claiming race at some point.
Right.
And they'll say, "Yeah," looking at me like, "Where's he going with this?" And I'll say, "Okay, so would you put your child up for sale? Because that's what you're doing."
Right.
And they sit there sometimes with mouth agape. They have no answer for that.
Well,
Right.
they know. Then they know we're not.
That
The
too.
quote stupid activists
Right,
that
that-
need a job and
that
have nothing
too.
better to do.
Right. So this nonsense that they're treated better. Again, would you stick your child? And I wanted to mention Dr. Craig Kulikowski. He's a prominent equine veterinarian. Please look him up on our website. We've got some video clips of
I'll
him.
put it in the show notes.
Yeah, testifying before the New York State Senate in 2019. He started his career at a vet school at the track. And after experiencing that for a year, he just swore it off. It was a horrible experience. And so he talks about not only the unformed bodies, and I do remember when he was comparing a 2-year-old horse to a 6-year-old child. After he was done with his testimony, his statement, one of the senators who from the Saratoga region, no surprise, asked him, "Well, we put our children in youth sports like little league and gymnastics, and what's the difference?" And without missing a beat, Dr. Kulikowski said, "These horses are going right to the Super Bowl.
Right.
There's no easing in here,
No.
and there's no parents, protecting them and watching out for their better interests." And so of course it's all about getting that horse to these high stakes races as quickly as possible. So these adolescents, as I said earlier,
Right.
are coming off the track with osteoarthritis and degenerative joint disease. That's something you don't see with children.
Right.
So,
and that's a perfect segue to my next question / observation. So, we'll talk about how we can talk about it here, how we are abolitionists, we're vegan abolitionists, our organization. And so we're not interested in reform and just an end to this horrible industry for good. So when people say that the problem with racing, we see this a lot on social media, the problem with racing is they're racing them too young. They need to wait until they're an answer to that. When we hear that, what would you say to that?
Well, first off, that's not going to solve those other issues that we talked about. So
the other cruelties.
Again, we're just talking about death, right? So we estimate that some 1,800 horses are being killed every year. So pie in the sky, something that'll never happen. Let's say they were able to half that.
Right.
My question to America would be, is that acceptable then?
Right.
1,000 horses dying every year for $2 bets? And if not, then you tell me what the number is. What is your acceptable loss ratio? Because everyone, including people in the racing industry, we have quotes on our website, know that 0 is impossible. It'll never happen. So, but let's just put the death aside.
Right.
These reforms will never address the confinement, will never address the tools that they use, the nose chains, the lip chains, the tongue ties, the mouth bits, the whips. Okay, can't address, can't.
Right.
As far as the ages of the horses, yes, would it be better for the horses to wait until they were 5 or 6 to begin training and racing? Oh, yeah, of course it would, because we're talking about these unformed bodies. Never going to happen. Why? It's cost prohibitive. These animals are expensive, not only to breed, but to take care of them. They're never going to wait 5, 6 years to begin trying to get a return on their investment.
Right.
Never going to happen. And very important, and something that we talk about all the time. Often you'll hear reformers talk about, let's ban 2-year-old racing.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much difference between a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. They're all adolescents. 5-year-olds are still immature. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just getting rid of 2-year-old racing, not going to make any difference.
Right.
Okay. So let's put this nonsense to bed.
Right.
Right. Once and for all. Right. And again, it's not going to happen. They're not going to wait. Now, the biggest races are for 3-year-olds, and they have to have that 2-year-old season to prepare them for the Triple Crown races when they're 3.
Right.
Never going to change. It's been like that from the beginning. Never going to change.
And it just occurred to me as you're saying that they will not take care of them. They won't do that. Spend all that expense to wait until they're 6, right? They won't keep them forever either.
Right.
So they discard them.
Right.
They're laundering them. They don't sell them directly to slaughter anymore. They launder them to someone else. They wind up with a kill buyer. They go for bail, which is a whole other episode if we want to get into that. So how much does it cost? A formula that you had used before?
So when I talk about slaughter, I throw this out. So the foal crop, which is the very telling phrase that they use for the number of new thoroughbreds coming into the system each year, it's declined significantly. It's down 50% over the past 20 years because racing is in decline, which we can get into. But it's around 18,000 or so. So if you were to try to guarantee forever safe landing for each and every member of the foal crop, so when they come off the track, those 18,000 horses, we're going to guarantee them a forever home. Okay, assuming a 5-year, roughly 5-year racing career, and I put that in quotes. Assuming a 25-year lifespan, which is a reasonable estimate for horses, and an average annual cost of some $6,000, which horse people tell me is cheap.
Right.
And that doesn't really include any extraordinary veterinary care that they have to get. But let's assume, try to be conservative here. Okay.
Right.
Assuming those numbers, the industry would need to come up with some $2 billion, in order to guarantee a safe landing for every member of the foal crop. $2 billion. That's just this year's foal crop. The same would be needed next year, and the year after that, and the year after that,
Right.
and the year after that. So the racing industry, in short, is creating thousands of horses every year for which it has neither the desire nor the ability to care for post-exploitation at the track, hence slaughter. So they can put out there that we got these strict no slaughter policies, and they got these signs saying that if an owner or trainer is caught knowingly selling his horse to slaughter,
never happened.
Knowingly is the key word, right? He or she will have his license stripped. First off, that's never happened. So you're telling me that horses aren't going to slaughter still? Of course they are, right?
No, they are, because they're being rescued.
Right. We see it all the time on social media.
Right.
If the number of horses going to slaughter has decreased, and it has, it's not anything that the racing industry is doing. It's because there are more people involved on social media, either individuals or rescue groups, getting engaged on this issue. There is certainly less demand for American horse meat because of all the drugs in the system.
Right.
But it has nothing to do with what the racing industry has tried to do.
Right.
So clearly, slaughter is still a big issue. Before we get off on something else, I just wanted to circle back to Dr. Kolakowski. So getting back to the claiming races and the owners and trainers saying, "Oh, they're pampered and we treat them like our own children." Dr. Kolakowski has a great line in his testimony where he says, keeping a 1,000-pound horse locked in a 12 by 12 stall for over 23 hours a day. He says, by the way, 23 and a half hours a day.
Yeah.
Is akin to keeping a 100-pound child locked in a 4x4 closet for over 23 hours a day. So again, that's the question for an owner or trainer. Would you lock your child in a 4x4 closet for over 23 hours a day? It's if not for the gravity involved, it would be worthy of an SNL skit.
It's all. So another thing that we see come up as you were talking about the billions of dollars to I'll see it to something once in a while where people will say, well, a portion of the handle or her better or whatever people come out with all these different things that they want to do should go to retirement
aftercare.
So aftercare, but they would never be able to.
It's smoke and mirrors. It's absolute propaganda. And it plays well with the media and the public, aftercare organizations, and
they have to retire this horse.
Right, a certain person, like you said, a certain percentage of the of either the handle, which is the bet on the horses,
winnings,
or the winnings, or the entries. There's going to be an entry fee. There's all kinds of solutions or supposed solutions bandied about, but it's drop in the ocean. And of course, it's never, like I said, $2 billion. Where's that money going to come from?
Right. The industry is not going to put it up. Let's talk about the industry in decline and also horse racing subsidies.
So we have a page on our website, tracks that have been shuttered since the year 2000. We're up to 50.
Right.
Just since the year 2000. And in that time, only a handful of new ones have opened, but only possible because of subsidies, taxpayer subsidies.
Right.
But before we get into the subsidies, so all the metrics across the board are down significantly. As I talked about the full crop, but the number of race days, the number of races, the number of horses racing, which is called the field size.
Right.
The amount bet, the handle, the total handle when adjusted for inflation, attendance, all of these metrics are down 50% or more over the past couple of decades. Clearly, this industry is in massive decline.
Right.
It does well on Triple Crown days, no question. Saratoga does well. Saratoga is one of only 5 or 6 tracks in the entire country that are really profitable. Okay, the vast majority of this industry is a house of cards that is being propped up by taxpayer subsidies. So around about the turn of the century, states racing industry in Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, it would be easier to name the states that don't subsidize, mind you. So roughly 75% of the industry at large is being propped up. So what they did was they went to their state legislatures and they said, look, with casinos now and state lotteries, we can no longer compete.
Right. They didn't have all that competition before.
Yeah, conveniently ignore that for decades.
Right.
Dog racing and horse racing had a monopoly on legal gambling outside of Nevada for decades. So they conveniently leave that out. But they're crying, look, we can't compete anymore. The public is more interested in casinos, and now this competition is that much different because of mobile sports betting, right?
Oh, yes.
You could pick up your phone and bet on real sports involving autonomous human beings, baseball, basketball, football, just on your phone. So they went to the legislatures 2003, 2004, and they said, look, so many thousands of jobs are tied to the horse racing industry. We need help here. Otherwise, these people are going to be out of work. Well, politicians are politicians, right? And they don't want to be on the wrong side of this issue. So they voted these subsidies in.
They don't want to be on the wrong side of people losing their jobs.
That's
About, that's about the long and the short of it.
Yeah, it was long before us, Horseracing Wrongs. It was long before anybody was aware of what was happening in the racing industry. And so the vote was easy. They voted these subsidies in. So here we are in both New York and Pennsylvania, over $3 billion in each state later. And
the B again.
In taxpayer subsidies.
Right.
And where's the racing industry? They're asking for more money. It's not enough what they're getting. So what they did was it varies from state to state.
Right.
But the basic blueprint is this.
Right.
They asked for licenses to open up slot parlors on site at the track.
What we call racinos.
Racinos. It's a combination of racetrack and casino. And a portion of that revenue from the slots machines, instead of going back to the state in the form of a tax, was being diverted over to the racing operation, to the point where in Pennsylvania, almost 90% of the purse money, which is the amount of money that's divvied up among the winning owners.
Right.
Typically the first, second, and third place, or historically first, second, third place. But now, because they're so flush with cash from these racinos, they pay first through last.
Right.
But the purse money that's doled out to the owners and trainers, almost 90% is coming from slot machines, not from money bet on the races, and certainly not from attendance. They don't even count attendance. They don't even charge for attendance.
Right.
Right. So it's
there's nobody there. You visited some of the
right. We did a photo
State.
essay on our website. I visited all 11 tracks in New York. There are 7 harness tracks, and harness tracks, for people who don't know, the harness industry is a form of racing where they use a cart,
right?
Still have a whip wielding driver,
right?
And as opposed to the flat races where it's just a jockey on top, same thing. No, it's just all horrible and exploitative and cruel.
Right.
But there are 7 harness tracks in New York, 4 thoroughbred tracks. We did a photo essay trying to go on like a Friday night, which should be theoretically their big night for the public. And, under 60 people at most of these tracks.
Full casinos, empty stands.
For a way of saying it. And the people at the harness tracks especially are like 65-year-old guys. They're hardened, what are called horse players. They're lifelong gamblers on horse racing. There's no young people there. Saratoga is the lone exception.
Right.
Out of 11 tracks, only 1 is successful. Only 1. Belmont Park is not successful outside of 1 weekend a year, the Belmont Stakes weekend.
Right.
Triple Crown race. That's it. Otherwise, it's the same as Aqueduct. It's the same as Finger Lakes. These are dead tracks. And so 10 of the 11, Belmont wouldn't have closed because it is the site of the Triple Crown race. But if forced to rely just on their own revenue, 10 of 11 would have closed years ago.
Right. All
6 Pennsylvania tracks would have closed years ago without these subsidies. There's no Saratoga equivalent in Pennsylvania.
Right.
So clearly our task is that much harder, right, as activists, because we not only have to change hearts and minds and get people to look at this industry through a fresh lens. Something that I like to say when I'm giving presentations is that I grew up a big sports fan. And although I didn't follow racing as intently as I did other, like football, basketball, baseball, I remember rooting on Seattle Slow and Affirmed back in the 70s. And I knew who Secretariat was. Why? Because it was sold to me as just another sport, especially here in the Saratoga region. It dominated the sports pages every single day in the summer times. Yeah, still does to a lesser extent. But the newscast at nighttime led with Saratoga. Horse racing was on the cover of Sports Illustrated 46 times in that iconic magazine's first 30 years. ESPN named Secretariat the 35th greatest athlete of the 20th century. And there were a couple other horses and a couple of jockeys on that list of top 100.
Right.
So it was sold to me as another sport. And that is our big challenge, is to get people to say, hey, wait a minute here. Why are we still calling this a sport? We always talk about the analogy with dog racing. It's the exact same thing. there's no difference in the way the respective species are being treated. In fact, I argue that horse racing is worse because of slaughter, something that doesn't exist with dog racing. Yet, dog racing was never considered a sport. It was always just a gambling.
A seedy gambling.
Seedy gambling. I defy anyone to name one prominent greyhound in the history of dog racing. Horse racing, you can name several right off the top of your head. I just named a few.
It's no wonder why, the animal rights community really didn't know anything before you came along.
Right.
Because, I think they just thought, they saw like the Kentucky Derby, and you'd see like PETA or one of those organizations, they would just put like boycott the Kentucky Derby, like a little graphic or something. And that was it. But I think that everyone, even activists, thought maybe, I don't know if they consciously thought it, but maybe it just didn't seep into their consciousness that this could be cruel. But you see, these horses are worth millions of dollars, and they're being pampered, and they have roses on them, and they're bathing them down, and they're shiny, and they're loved. And so I really think that that's why it was kind of just not really
under the radar.
Yeah, I'm sure there were people out there, in different areas, maybe holding a protest.
Like you said, we are ethical vegans first.
Right.
We came to this issue already animal rights activists.
Right.
We spend the lion's share of our time on this because, as mentioned, no one else was doing it. But we understand that just by the numbers, this is just a fraction of the overall horror that is animal exploitation. Food, obviously, animal testing. We get fur, but that makes no difference to the individual exploited horse in the racing industry, right?
Right.
And it is our belief that every exploited species deserves a concentrated voice. And that's, again, why I started this and why you started the nonprofit, because they all deserve that voice. So sometimes I've heard activists deride single issue campaigns, as they call them.
I was going to ask you about this.
But that's, you can do both. You can,
absolutely.
If there's a need, if there's no one else doing it, like I always, I love Sharp. They have taken on the rodeo industry in America. They're vegans. They're all in on animal abolition, or animal liberation. Grade 2K, as mentioned, they're vegans. They're with us philosophically. But they saw a need. Somebody needed to speak for those rodeo animals and for the greyhounds. It's the same thing that we do. You can do both. You can trumpet the larger message while dedicating the bulk of your time to one specific species, because, again, the horses need that. They can't afford to wait for the world to go vegan, right?
Right.
That's a long way off, unfortunately. And food, especially, is that highest rung on the ladder. That'll be the last to go. So in the meantime, we can get these wins, and it made a difference to those greyhounds. And there's 2 tracks left in the entire country. It made a difference.
There's a federal bill.
Right. So those animals who are not bred, to live that life of abject misery in the greyhound industry, are better for it today. And so Ringling Brothers is another great example, right? If not for the dedication of the activists who went out there, and we were part of that here in Albany, protesting in front of Ringling performances, that wouldn't have happened. And that doesn't mean something to those elephants. Of course it does. Absolutely. Right. So that's what we believe.
And it changes sensibilities too. So then that vegan message I do believe that the single issue causes do bring the plight of one animal to somebody. And we've seen this happen, I can say anecdotally, I don't have hard data, and I could reach out to people. I could someday really think about doing that. But so many people who came to our protests or came to the blog on Horseracing Wrongs, and even before that to your animal rights blog on the Times Union website, that they weren't vegan. They were animal lovers. And they came along. I know people who came to our protests, and when you're standing around other vegans, And I remember one woman who had told us she came to a few protests. She was so angry that horses were dying at Saratoga. She went out to lunch a couple days later after attending one or two protests, and she had a chicken sandwich, and she just looked at it and said, "What am I doing?" And the pieces, just fell into place. So there is a place for single issue causes, because it does, when you just open someone's eye to one animal, sometimes it has to be outside of the companion animals, though, because I think, we have like, these are friends, these are food,
Right.
but when you open those single issue causes can do it. Like if someone wants to ban, they're going to think about that. And then especially if they're surrounded by other vegans and they're talking about what vegan restaurant and vegan this and vegan that and vegan tattoos or whatever we have, shirts, it does really, really add up. And I hope that that's really, hope that really resonates and is empowering to people listening, because I do think that, we always have to be out there being a voice for the animals every chance you get. And that's something that I'm always talking about.
100% obviously.
Yeah. This is like a typical conversation we have
Right.
like all day long, like at breakfast.
Right. You
We talk about all of
you
these
talked
things.
about the messaging.
Right.
So with each one of these victories, as one of these cruel industries falls, that animal rights, that larger animal rights messaging, the animal liberation, the abolitionist messaging becomes ever more normalized.
Right.
And so I like to talk about how a ringland elephant, eventually, someday, probably long after we're gone, but someday, that logic will be irrepressible. A ringland elephant is a Saratoga racehorse, is a Birmingham greyhound, is a fur commission mink, is a Petland puppy, is a Procter and Gamble rabbit, is a Smithfield pig, right? And eventually, the logic will be there for all to see. And if we're going to say that it's wrong to abuse elephants in the circus, then why isn't it wrong to abuse pigs on a factory farm? And why isn't it wrong to eat them? So I believe we will get there someday. But that's another benefit of these so-called single issue campaigns.
Right.
Again, as long as you come to it from the animal rights perspective, as long as you are animal liberationists, as long as you are abolitionists, then yes, you should be able to focus on one, give the lion's share of your time to one particular, or even one or two issues, but at the same time, trumpet the larger message and we never miss an opportunity to do vegan outreach, right? We're always going somewhere.
We see. Yeah. And
Yeah.
wherever, Massachusetts, Kingston, wherever we can go, we try to get out there and talk to people and have those conversations, because it's so important. And I think that it's, just to be out there and talking to people, whether it's you're at a rodeo protest or a horse racing protest. And a lot of people have said, why don't you have vegan messaging at the horse racing protest? And I said, well, I think it's confusing to people to have a vegan outreach at a horse racing facility, at a track. But I do think, and then they're going to keep searching. And then, like I said, just that one animal, they understand that that horse is abused from the moment he or she is born and discarded after. If they're not killed horribly on the track, they just understand that. And then they start looking at other animals the same way. And I think it's a good way to get people out of that. I think the companion animals sometimes do it for people, because we've had people on the podcast, tell me your vegan story, and their companion animal is the one that made them vegan.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always happen, because I think people are just like, a dog, a cat, and that's,
and you tell me all the time about people that came to our issue as horse people, and just by reading our website, just by listening to us, they started thinking about their relationship with other species, and they made that change. And we don't have a litmus test. We don't say you can only come to our protest if you are vegan, and we don't we would never
Can't do
allow
that.
we would never allow any of our protesters to make someone feel uncomfortable, or they wouldn't our people wouldn't do it anyway, but
Right.
we wouldn't allow someone to ask, hey, are you vegan? Like, of course not. We are warm,
No.
welcoming, and
And
we're
they're
happy.
going to be vegan.
Right.
We know it.
We're happy to have you on the line with us,
Right.
standing up for the horses, and hopefully just by osmosis, just by being around other vegans, that that you'll make changes in
Right.
other areas of your life.
It seems like it's on sometimes it's on the most worst day that I have. This is not, the beginning of our episode today, it was very solemn, and now we're positive about everything, right? Because we're out here fighting, right? We want everyone listening to fight and to do little, big and small things for animals every day. But there are hard days. They're really hard days. And it's on some of those really hard days where I'll have someone that's maybe a blog reader for the Horseracing Wrongs blog I'm talking about, and they'll send me a text or a message, and they'll say, I'm vegetarian already. I went a few months ago. How do I go vegan? What do I buy? And I'm like, oh my God, here we go. It's like, and these are just happening because from the beginning in the Horseracing Wrongs blog, you had animal rights language from the beginning.
Mhm.
And I remember I still have people who ask us, like, are you guys vegan? I'm like, okay, maybe you don't follow me on social media. Patrick's not on social media. You're not on social media, but I am. And I'm like, maybe they're not looking at my social media, but I think a lot of times they assume because we're a single issue cause that we're only like horse people or whatever. And that's what I say, like read
The about section.
in our about section. And I'll post that in the show notes too, big show notes. But so I want to make sure everyone goes to horseracingdogs.org too.
Circle back on the subsidies. So something that in hearts and minds, obviously, that they ask people to look at this through a fresh lens.
Right.
But that's not enough, because as long as these laws stay on the books, these exploiters will be laughing all the way to the bank.
Right.
I've got a quote on the website from someone in the harness industry. Now, harness racing, as I mentioned earlier, with the cart, harness racing, and I can state this with 100% certitude, harness racing would not exist in America today without subsidies.
Right.
Wouldn't be one track left. But there's a quote from someone in the harness industry saying that there's never been a better time to be involved in harness racing than today. Well, how can that be when you don't even charge for admission? You don't count admission. Our handle is way down. Nobody cares about harness racing. Well, why? Because they're getting so much money from the slot machines that should be going back to the states for things like education, property tax relief, transportation,
programs,
infrastructure, whatever.
anything.
Again, think about this. In New York, we're about $230 million per year in taxpayer subsidies to horse racing. By the way, they produce nothing on the other end. I think they return about $10 million in tax revenue based on their handle. 10 million against 230 million. So it's a net drain on the New York State economy of $220 million.
It's disgusting.
That's about $1 billion every 4 years.
Right.
Okay. It could be used to hire new teachers or support staff, fund lunch programs, repair decaying buildings. There's so many better uses for that money than propping up this cruel, deadly industry. So that's our job, is to get these laws changed. We are working in both New York and Pennsylvania most recently to try to get bills passed. We have a bill in New York. We will continue to work on that. We're going to have a bill shortly in Pennsylvania, which we will keep you updated on.
Right.
Take actions and call legislators and say this. We don't want our taxpayer money going to the racing industry any longer. So yes, it's a big part of the problem are these subsidies, and it has to be addressed.
And it just occurred to me, it's a triple deception. So their taxpayers are unwittingly paying,
supporting
the horse racing industry.
They go to the racinos, like you said.
They go to the racinos. They have no idea
that a part of their money
no idea
to the horse racing.
No idea that there'd be no horse racing if they went to a different casino, right? And then the horse racing industry is hiding the cruelty and the death. So it's this triple deception that's happening to people. And now, if you're in a state, there's racing in roughly 38 states.
Yeah, around that. Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a state that has no racing, you would know nothing about any of this, right? Because it's not like down the street. Like we grew up, in Albany, New York, and Saratoga. I went to Saratoga race course every year as a child with my family. And then I went as an adult until I became vegetarian. And then I was like, wait a minute. There's animals here. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this anymore. And then when I met you, I was like, oh, okay. I was that little, I was right. I didn't know why until you did everything you do. But I just think that it's just so, it's just so hidden in so many ways, and I think people need to know. So what can we do? So we'll talk about a few things we can do. Horseracingwrongs.org is our website. So if you want to learn more there, we have an action group on Facebook where we post actions. We don't post actions every day, but we post meaningful actions. And a lot of times it is maybe to a legislator or a governor, or, sometimes when the FOIAs come out, or sometimes we have specific actions, sponsors, things like that. And then, of course, anybody can reach out and advocate. They can hold protests, they can organize protests, join a protest, and that's on our website as well.
Yeah, never miss an opportunity. Remember, with any exploited animal, we are their voices.
Right.
Right. They cannot speak for themselves.
Right.
So never miss an opportunity to advocate for horses or any other animal that needs us.
One more thing before I forget, just to circle back again to harness racing, because the horses used for harness racing are different than the horses used for like flat track racing. So we have thoroughbreds for flat track racing, and then and also quarter horses are used for flat track.
Horses too, right?
But the horses used for standard bred horses used for harness racing. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so
they don't die as
they
young.
don't die. They don't break down, which is the industry term. They don't break down as often as their thoroughbred and quarter horse cousins, but their length of servitude is much longer. Typically, much longer. We're talking they could go, into the 12, 13 years range, where thoroughbreds typically 5, 6. Sometimes you will see older horses, but as a rule, standardbreds are exploited for longer periods of time.
Right.
And when they're done with them, if they don't go directly to slaughter, often they are what is called amished. So they fall into the hands of the Amish, who are notoriously bad to their animals.
Very cool.
They run a lot of puppy mills. They run a lot of these livestock auctions, which can be kill auctions, where killer buyers go to find animals to ship to slaughter.
Right.
So the Amish run these poor standardbreds into the ground, get every last ounce of work out of them, and then they ship them to slaughter.
Right.
So yeah, we've always, right from the beginning, included the standardbreds and talk about the cruelty.
A lot of people think we don't, so they don't understand that we do.
Right. And it's just important for people to understand that even though they don't die as frequently, their suffering is every bit as bad, if not worse, because of just by virtue of the length.
And I know you use the term racehorse a lot, which a lot in the animal rights community would say don't name the animal with their servitude, name. And I know you do that for a specific reason.
I just try to be. It's just a way to describe what animal I'm talking about. It's a racehorse, right? If I just say, a horse died, at parks, I think it's more descriptive to say a racehorse died.
Right.
Well, in that case, a horse died at parks, meaning Parks is a racetrack, and
Right.
people know that. Well, it would be a race
But
horse.
there are other horses on tracks too.
There are. There are what are called pony horses.
Right.
They're not ponies; they're just called a pony horse.
Right.
So they're former racehorses,
Right.
who are continued to be exploited after their racing career
Yeah.
is over. And so their lives are are horrible
Right.
at the track. They're kept in those same tiny stalls,
Right.
and so the pony horse is there to escort the racehorse, to and from
Right.
the race. But we do get information on those horses dying. Sometimes they just collapse and die.
Right.
At the ripe old age of 12.
Right.
And remember, a horse can live to 25 or even 30.
Right.
And
And remember, there's nowhere for any horse to graze, or there's no land at any track.
right,
It's just not.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's not possible,
right,
and
right.
you'll never be able to do it either.
right.
So
Yeah, that's the general overview. So, like you said, get involved in any way. You could write a letter to the editor. You can, if you hear someone talking about it on a radio call-in show, call in. You don't have to be an expert. You just read off of our website. Really, we encourage people to just copy and paste.
just
Right?
absolutely, just be their voice.
That's why we have it out there. And if you need more expert testimony, reach out to us. And that's our priority. It's
Right.
always our priority. This is
Right.
our issue.
If you have a legislator that will meet with us, we will join that
We will
call
be
with
there.
you. We'll be there.
We will
We'll
be
be there on virtually or in person if we can, if we're
Right.
close enough to get there.
Right.
The one thing that I always say too, that on my worst day, the thing that gets me through, because there are hard days. There are videos that we watch and it's hard. And the other thing that really gets me through is remembering that these horses, before we came around to educate, were virtually ignored for over 150 years. I mean, I use 150 because I think Saratoga is the oldest sporting
Mhm.
venue. They call it sporting venue in the country. And they're over 150 years old. But now these horses are loved,
Mhm.
they're cared about, they're fought for, and there's just people from coast to coast, and we have international partners. And I feel that horses are such sensitive, magnificent spiritual beings. I just really hope that they know that we're out there fighting for them. And
At
just,
some level, I think that they do. And,
Yeah.
and I love that line that you use. They were voiceless
right,
for well over a century, and they died
just
in
suffered alone.
anonymity. And now it's no longer the case, because they have a dedicated voice, Horse
Right.
Racing Wrongs, and we'll fight this to our dying breath. And
Right.
um,
But we're making progress.
yeah, we're making progress. Again, go to our website. You'll see the tracks that have closed since the year 2000, and some prominent tracks.
Right.
Arlington, outside Chicago, and
Golden Gate.
Suffolk Downs. Yeah, Golden Gate, most recently in Northern California. Currently, there is no racing in all of Northern California.
That is huge.
Their tracks closed this past summer.
Right.
Golden Gate closed. There are 3 tracks left in the entire state right now, and they're all in the South. There is no thoroughbred racing in the whole of New England currently. After Suffolk Downs closed in Boston. We are making progress.
Right.
And as I mentioned, we're working very hard on the subsidies in New York and Pennsylvania, so that can be a template for other states. We get a win somewhere. When we get a win somewhere,
Right.
Other states will follow.
Right. And we've had, I would say, 100% success fighting off new tracks from opening.
We have.
There are couple new tracks have opened. We weren't
because of subsidies.
because of subsidies, and they kind of slid under the radar. But Massachusetts, I think 8 times or 10
Maybe
times,
10,
a lot,
yeah.
10 times I think, has tried. And we help advocates there.
In Georgia,
Michigan.
Michigan.
So we just, wherever a new track they're trying to open, people contact us, and we just try to help
Yep.
them be a voice for the horses and
Right.
use everything they can use.
And again,
Stop that.
just finishing up with this. So when we started, we were dismissed as animal rights extremists, right?
Right.
And especially being in Saratoga, Saratoga based.
Yeah.
The idea that we were going to end horse racing was outrageous. It's never going to happen. So we were admonished to work with the industry,
Right.
make their lives better, work on reforms, right? And so since then, we're talking, 12 years, 11, 12 years?
Yeah.
We are to the point where not only are deaths in this region, capital region in New York, being reported,
Right.
which was unheard of when we first started.
Right.
We were told by a prominent local meteorologist who was sympathetic with us and our cause that you'll never get the local media to say anything bad about Saratoga,
Right.
Because it's such a driver of
So
the economy.
untouchable.
It's so
Yeah.
popular. That's changed.
Let's change.
It's being reported. But also, I personally had conversations with the editorial board of both the Washington Post and the Philadelphia Inquirer. And shortly thereafter, both of those boards came out with editorials calling for horse racing to end, not to be reformed, but to end.
Right.
And most recently, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette called for the subsidies in Pennsylvania to end, and they cited us in their editorial. We are making progress.
Right.
Again, the narrative has changed because of. I hope this does not sound boastful, but I think it serves as a story, a good instructive story for people that feel like they can't do anything, they're powerless in the face of animal exploitation. If you just concentrate on one or two things and arm yourself with facts and evidence, you can make a change, and you can have an impact. And I do believe that that's what's happened with us. The narrative has changed. People are talking about horse racing ending in America. People are talking about following what happened with dog racing.
Right.
So that's a sea change from where we began and how we began. So,
and we're just two people. So it didn't happen with just Nicole and Patrick.
Right.
And I say that all the time. It had to happen with other people, the Leslies and the Marthas and the Jens and the Baileys and all these people who came and saw what we were doing and wanted to join and saw what these poor horses were going through. And I know, like even in our Horseracing Wrongs action group, I know people I can email and say, oh, they live in California, or they live in New Jersey. We need a letter to the editor.
Yeah.
And
wonderful
that letter,
people all over the country. And even if, like you said, there's
it's a network.
Some of them, can't or don't feel comfortable protesting. It's not for everyone. Although having said that, it's not, as intimidating as you might think.
It's not hard.
Right. It's not. You can you don't have to chant if you don't feel comfortable chanting. You can just stand there with a sign.
Yeah.
You can leaflet. You can just offer people information. But some people, maybe they can't physically, or maybe there's not a track nearby.
Yeah.
So there's other ways. And you've got this great writers group that you reach out to. And all over the country.
It's that community of people that was created through Horseracing Wrongs that we're just so blessed to have.
We are blessed.
And it's
wonderful people.
And we've seen progress because of that. And so I say that all the time. A lot of people say, Nicole and Pat. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's this community. And so we hope that we inspire people to, because as you see, we are very positive. We've been told within a few, we had a reporter do like a story about us once. And I think in the beginning she said, like, they're so positive. And we are, just because I think when you're active, it changes things. When you see animal cruelty every single day on your social media feeds and you just feel helpless, it's like, do something, whether it's in the comments. Look, I go in the comments for other animal issues all the time, and I will speak up for whatever animal I feel is being treated poorly, or whatever it is, or sponsor or something, and just use your voice and don't get into fights. We do have an episode about that. Don't get into fights online, but just take that opportunity every day to just find a little bit of something. And it does really feed your soul. And
be active.
Yeah.
Is active.
Yeah.
Be active, and you will feel better about it, because you're trying to do something about it, and you will get these little victories along the way. They're not as frequent as we would like. They don't come as quickly as we would like, but they do happen. And when they do, savor them. and you move on and you keep fighting
Right.
because the horses need it. The horses, all these exploited animals, they desperately need
And
us.
there are so many victories lately on
Yeah.
social media. There's different, in different states, and there's different municipalities banning, from, animal sales, or it is happening. And I just think it's so important that people stay in it and keep being a voice for the animals. So that is it for today. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you for listening.
And thank you. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us I'll put it in the show notes. You can reach out to us through our website. Please share this episode with your friends. Please make sure you subscribe. And we will see you next time on In Behalf of Animals.
And so long, everyone.
Thank you. Hey friends, if you're enjoying In Behalf of Animals, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen so you'll never miss an episode. And if you love what we're doing, it would mean so much for you to share this podcast with a friend. It's one of the best ways to help more people hear these important conversations. You can also join our Substack community for updates, behind-the-scenes notes, and ways to get involved. Thanks for listening, and remember, be a voice for the animals every chance you get.